Takarazuka fan podcast, a podcast where Takarazuka fans from all over the world get together and squee about Takarazuka. Today we have me, I am Carly.
And I'm Becca.
And this is Caroline.
And we are going to start, as usual, with our happy things. My happy thing this week, well, it's not really this week, it was last week. My happy thing of recent times is the Cosmos Troupe performance of Elizabeth had their Shinjin Koen, which is like the Rising Star performance. And I heard only good things about it, which makes me very, very happy because somebody I like very, very, very much got to play Lucchini, and I was extremely proud of her.
She was fantastic.
That's Kazuki Sora. So the cast was Rukaze Hikaru played Death, and Hoshikaze Madoka played Elizabeth, and Kazuki Sora played Lucchini, and Rui Makise played Franz Joseph, and I forgot who played Rudolph because I'm terrible.
Chiaki played Rudolph.
Okay. And yeah, it sounds like they all did a great job, and I wish I could have gone to see it.
I think, obviously all Shinjin Koen are really great opportunities, but I think there's something really special about the underclassmen being able to take on these kind of big, really known roles, and it must be exciting for them, too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's more so than in, like, an original production. There's such an extensive history of really great people in those roles that when the younger star brings something different and special to it, I think it stands out more.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
So Becca, what's your happy thing?
So my happy thing is that recently there have been Demachi photos going around, mostly on Twitter, of Michan's Demachi, but it is, so basically, so Michan Hokutokairi, so her partner Hinami Fu-chan has been actually walking her to the door, carrying her bags for her, and then waving to her as she goes off, and it's incredibly cute, it's incredibly sweet, and it really just kind of reinforces this idea of them as a married couple, and it makes me, as Michan is getting ready to graduate, and it's a really stressful time, I just feel so happy and fortunate that she has a partner who is not only a wonderful musumeyaku, but who has been so supportive.
They're so cute together. Every time I see one of those photos, I just think, like, what a great time to be alive.
Yeah, no, they're so married.
Yeah.
Carol, what's your happy thing?
My happy thing, well, I just came back from a 2-week trip to Kansai where I did a lot of Soragumi Elizabeth, including Ishidi Koen, which is a play for a different episode. But my happy thing, like one of the highlights of a week already, or 2 weeks already full of highlights, was that I went to the Takarazuka Hall of Fame with 2 friends. For the people who are not familiar with it, the Takarazuka Hall of Fame is a museum-like place. They opened at a Grand Theatre in Takarazuka, I think 2 years ago for the 100th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a museum that consists of 2 floors. The first floor has a permanent exhibition with pictures and text and props and costumes belonging to like old stars, like stars through the history, and also stuff, like famous stuff through the history, which is really interesting, except all the text is in Japanese, so if you can't read Japanese, the fun is kind of spoiled by that. And you're not allowed to take pictures of anything there. But then you get to the second floor, which is where the fun really starts, which is where they have 2 temporary exhibitions. On one side, they will have the costumes and props from the current troupe that's playing on the Grand Theatre of the previous show. So right now, Soragumi is doing Elizabeth, and the museum had the costumes and props for Shakespeare and Hot Eyes. And on the other side, they have various temporary exhibitions. Right now, they were doing Tsukigumi Top Stars, and I think later this month they're starting with Yukigumi Top Stars. So, as you go in, the first thing you see is an array of costumes. This time there were costumes for Hot Eyes from really different scenes and different people, which is always great. Like, you can take pictures of everything you want, not touch, but you can look really closely. There's no glass or anything. And they have the sketches as well, which are great for anyone who's interested in like costume design.
Yeah, I love seeing the sketches, especially when the final product is dramatically different from the original concept.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So I think the Hall of Fame replaced the Pucci Museum, which used to be what was in that space. And the Hall of Fame, I think they redid the whole thing for the 100th anniversary, and it just looks a lot nicer. Don't get me wrong, like I have a special place in my heart for the old one, but it is really nice looking and well put together.
Yeah, like they have this corner off to the side on the second floor where you can like hold Shan used in the review or the parade and take pictures next to the parade costumes for the top stars. Since we went, when the show was on, like they were playing Elizabeth at the moment when we went inside, there was no one there, so we got to take like a dozen pictures with those costumes.
Nice.
That's awesome.
And they had a desk for Shakespeare as well, the see-through desk and chair that they use in the show, and you can sit at it and take pictures.
Oh, that's so cool.
And the best part, the highlight for me, is they had the props for Shakespeare set on, and they have like everything that the stars may have held during the show. They put it in like these glass cases. And among those props were the scripts, or like the papers that you see Asaka Manato, like Shakespeare, handing out to people, like writing out. And at first we were like, oh, that's nice. They actually made different pages for each show. Like there's The Merchant of Venice, there's Romeo and Juliet, there's Winter's Tale. And then my friend, who is far more observant than I am, was looking at the page for Winter's Tale, and she goes like, wait, aren't those lines for Romeo and Juliet? And we start looking there, it was everything written in English, and we're looking at them, and it's like, yeah, that's the balcony scene. Like, the character names are the characters from Winter's Tale, but the text, like, the lines are from the balcony scene of Romeo and Juliet. And then we start looking at the other pages, and all of them had the same text, like that one scene from Romeo and Juliet with different character names and, like, the different name of the play on top.
That's such a random change to make. Like, it's not like the audience can see those pages anyway. Like, why even go through the effort of changing the names then, I guess?
I think a lot of the signs and things like that, because I've looked at, the English signs for some older shows, and I think, I don't, sometimes they are not done with an English audience in mind, I'll say that.
Yes. But, like, we're probably one of the few people who, like, have noticed this.
Yeah, that's really funny.
Yeah, it was such a random thing to realize, because I once had, like, they went to the trouble of making different pages for all the shows, and I guess it probably helps in acting when you're holding, like, a page of the show, like, that's supposed to be going on now, I guess. But just, like, looking at, like, these characters, I see, like, Hamlet citing Juliet's lines on paper was really funny. Like, it's definitely a recommendation if everyone is ever at the Grand Theatre, go visit the Takarazuka Hall of Fame. It's a lot of fun.
I love the Hall of Fame. One of my favorite Takarazuka related memories, I guess, outside of a show is, I think the first time I went to the Hall of Fame, I was there alone in the middle of a random day, and this group of 4 or 5 tiny little, very slow walking old ladies was in the Hall of Fame with me, and they were pointing at all of the top stars from way, way, way back in the day, and saying, like, oh, she was such a great singer, but she was too short, and stuff like that. And I was lurking behind them, watching them, thinking, like, wow, they've been fans for like 70 years, and it's amazing that they A, saw these people, and B, remember these people, and I want to go up to them and say, can we be pen pals? But I didn't have the courage.
That's gonna be us in a couple of years, though.
But yeah, it's really fun. Okay, so today's topic is OG performances. We thought that since a lot of them don't really make it onto DVD or television, that this is a perspective that people who don't get to make it to Japan might be interested in hearing. So what we mean by OG performances is anything that somebody who used to be in Takarazuka but has retired from Takarazuka appears in her post-Takarazuka career. And there's a lot of different types.
Yes.
So to start, some of the major differences between Takarazuka performances and OG performances.
Dudes.
Aside from the obvious being that there are men, which, I don't know, I try and see as many things as possible whenever I go to Japan because I never know the next time I'll be able to go back. So amidst seeing so many current Takarazuka shows, every time I go into a theater for an OG show and there's a bunch of men on stage, it still feels weird to me.
And then kind of going along those lines, the other thing is just the physicality of it. So, you have lots of topics that are covered in OG shows that you would never touch in Takarazuka shows because it's just not the aesthetic. And then, gasp of horror, the actresses will, or there is kissing on stage. Real actual kissing.
Yeah. I witnessed that for the first time my last trip, and even though it's dumb and I shouldn't be surprised, I still gasped.
I think it must be particularly difficult for fans of a recently retired OG who's doing like a first show, one of her first shows, to suddenly see, especially when OG used to be an otokoyaku, to suddenly see her as playing a female role and kissing dudes.
Yeah. So not only that, but a lot of the content in general is a lot different than what you might see in Takarazuka because obviously everything is fair game. Modesty, fairness, grace, be damned.
Forget about it. For me, I saw a production of Man of La Mancha with Kiriya Hiromu, and one of the things that struck with me most is there is a scene in which the character that Kirian is playing, Dulcinea, is raped, and it's done during a dance sequence, and it's done tastefully, but it was hard to watch. Kirian did an amazing job, but just, I'm trying to remember if, I don't think Takarazuka has really ever shown a rape scene before, and so that was, not only was it very different, but, it was painful to watch, as it should be.
Yeah, I had the same experience with Black Mary Poppins 2 years ago, where Otosuki Kei had a similar scene. Because of how the show was set up, she was acting alone, but it was very obvious what she was trying to portray, and it was so strange to see like someone who I've always seen as an otokoyaku, and a very cheerful one at that, portraying a scene like that, and like she did it really well, but it was, as you said, painful to watch.
Yeah, I don't think I've had the opportunity to see anything live that's on that level. But I think Komu's next show is based on the play Ghosts. No, it's not based on the play Ghosts. It is the play Ghosts.
Wait, you mean the movie?
No, not the movie with like the pottery and whatnot. It's a very creepy play.
Okay.
And yeah, all I really know about it is that it's supposed to be creepy.
Yeah, Anarcade did it, I think 2 years ago or last year, and yeah, it is a very creepy show.
There are also a lot of productions that are not duplicated, but there are Takarazuka versions and non-Takarazuka versions, often starring people who used to be in Takarazuka, and it's interesting to compare them. I've never personally seen a Toho production of Elizabeth, for example, but everything I've heard indicates that I guess a lot less is removed from the original German version, and they feel very, very different.
Yeah, I think I have not seen any of the Toho versions live yet, but I remember reading about it a while ago, and I think something that, if I'm not mistaken, something that was interesting that they did for the Elizabeth Toho version is that they chose to keep in the storyline about the revolutionaries, which is not in the original German version.
Oh, interesting.
But they do add a lot of things that, like Elizabeth's daughter plays daughter dying, for example. That scene is not in the Takarazuka version, and it is in the Toho version.
And do they keep Watashi ga Odoru Toki?
Yes, I think so. Yes, they did.
Okay, I do like that song.
Yeah. I think something that I was really pleased with in the Toho version was Ichinanahachiku, which they did this year. This is not particularly an OG person like doing something, but there's a song in the original French version, Je vaux le monde, which is a song sang by Solange and other women. I think in the original version they're supposed to be all prostitutes, which is basically saying men suck and we have to take action because men are useless. And in the Takarazuka version they changed that into an otokoyaku song, which is a completely different text. And I seem to remember in the Kadeki interview at the time, Koike Sensei explained that because it was one of those songs like that gets like things going, they wanted to do it in an otokoyaku version because the otokoyaku are the main center of Takarazuka, which is fine. But I have not forgiven him yet for not letting Harumiyake sing the song. And it was very satisfying to see the demo version and see like the lady singing that song and just like singing that men are stupid.
It occurs to me that I think the production of Scarlet Pimpernel with Aran K that's coming up, it's the first one in recent memory that has been in Japan, and the Takarazuka version was actually pretty substantially rewritten for Takarazuka, for the better. I think it makes it a cleaner story, but I'm assuming they'll probably use that version now that I think about it.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I'm curious to see if they change it for the non-Takarazuka version that's coming up.
Well, what I've been reading is they have a foreign director coming in to do that show, and they're keeping, for example, the song that was written for Takarazuka, Hitokakure no Yuki, A Piece of Courage. But apparently they're changing some things, and they're adding a new song. Like there's a new, or at least one or multiple new songs. So it's going to be a rewritten version of the Broadway version of the show.
Interesting.
Frank Wildhorn, who originally wrote that show, though, he does have a reputation of just never letting anything settle. Like, I think Scarlet Pimpernel, in between its Broadway run and its tour, had like 4 different rewrites, so it's not that surprising.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of the major theater companies in Japan are actually connected. We talked about this in the Chicago episode a little bit, but the parent company that owns Takarazuka also owns Toho, which I guess is probably the largest like regular theater company in Japan, I would say. Like when I think of Toho, I think of it as like Japanese Broadway. And Umeda Arts also is under the same corporate umbrella. And so you see a lot of trading of stars, or like, for example, RNK played Percy in the 2008 Hoshigumi production of Scarlet Pimpernel, and now she's playing Marguerite in the outside production of Scarlet Pimpernel. And then you can also kind of play the copyright timing game.
Yeah.
If either Takarazuka announces a big show, something like Scarlet Pimpernel or Romeo and Juliet or Ichinanahachiku, where they obviously got a foreign license, the odds of it showing up in another production outside of Takarazuka, or vice versa, like this Scarlet Pimpernel production was announced and then everyone was saying, okay, so who is going to get Scarlet Pimpernel next year? And lo and behold, it's Benny.
And I believe when they license it, they get it for a certain number of years. So I think, even though we roll our eyes at the same shows getting done, I think it's often because they're trying to maximize their time with those licenses.
Yeah, definitely. And they're usually sort of big, glossy, popular shows. And obviously they want to get as much money out of what they have as they possibly can. So it makes sense from a business perspective. I think I don't know if it's Toho or not, but somebody is doing Romeo and Juliet.
It's Toho.
Soon. It's Toho?
Yeah.
So there's going to be a Toho.
I think we have a Takarazuka one in the future.
Yeah, next year. So I don't know when, or the Toho version is next year. So I don't know when that copyright officially kicks in, but I think someone's going to be getting it either in 2017 or 2018.
So the other big theater company in Japan is Shiki, which I think does the really big productions of Phantom of the Opera and Lion King and Wicked. And as far as I can tell, they're less based on star power and more just on the name of the show.
Yeah. Like, I've noticed picking up, like, their CDs in stores. Their productions are amazing, but if you want to look for a certain star, it's really hard to find, like, if the recording is of a specific person, because it doesn't list it on the CD, usually. Like Takarazuka or Toho usually will. So it's definitely, like, yeah.
They just don't seem to cast as much for particular stars.
And then, price is another difference.
Yes.
I think, Takarazuka is really very reasonable in the theater world.
It may not feel that way, but we promise.
Yeah, it may not feel that way. It certainly doesn't feel that way when you fall deeply enough that you need to see something 17 times. But in terms of the price of a single ticket, which, I mean, I live in New York and I like going to see Broadway shows. I will see something I love, like, if I go 3 times, it's very rare. So in terms of the price of a one-off ticket, I think Takarazuka is very affordable. You can get a good seat for the price of a mediocre seat in most places in the world, I think. And there's a lot, the pricing tiers are really great. I mean, you might be far away, you might need to use your opera glasses, but if you're really not rolling in cash and you want to go see Takarazuka, there is an option for you. I think it's very accessible.
Yes.
The OG shows,
not so much.
lately, not so much. I feel like the first time I went to Japan, the prices of Aseki were pretty similar. And Aseki is, so there are 4 tiers, I guess 5 if you count Tachimi. So 5 tiers of seating in both the Takarazuka Grand Theater and the Tokyo Theater. There is a block front and center that are SS that are the most expensive. Then there's a huge span of S, which is considered a good ticket. And then there's A, which is a little behind, and B, which is way in the back and the top. And B is the cheapest. And then there's Tachimi, which is Japanese for standing room. And that's in the back, and it's super, super cheap.
Oh, and also there's Tojitsuken, which is the very last row. You do get an actual seat, but it's only 2,500 yen.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, and so Tojitsuken are tickets that you buy on the same day. That's what that word means. But lately, especially, OG shows don't really have those options. And in a lot of cases, it's because the theater is smaller and it really doesn't make sense to have 5 pricing tiers. Even in theaters like the Umeda Arts Main Hall, which I don't know exactly how many seats it has, but it's a big theater. They only split it into 2 pricing tiers, and they're both significantly more expensive than the Takarazuka tickets. So as somebody who supports an OG more than anybody else, it hurts. It's a little. Okay, so along with the content of OG shows often being pretty different from the content of Takarazuka shows, even across productions of the same thing, we get a lot of Takarazuka OGs in roles that are different than what we're used to seeing them in, and maybe a little surprising. Becca, do you have some examples of that?
Yeah. So I saw a production of Mozart about 2 years ago, and Haruno Sumire Osa played the role, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but it was kind of this older matronly woman who was one of Mozart's sponsors, and it's the kind of role that would probably in a Takarazuka production be played by a Senka member, and Osa sang it beautifully. She really did a great job. But for me it was jarring because, maybe 7 years ago, I saw her in her final show as a Takarazuka, being this very suave otokoyaku. So this idea that she had kind of become this, I don't know I don't want to use the word matronly because she's 40 something, but I mean, it was certainly very, very different. And then Tatan, oh my god, I'm blanking on her stage name.
Koji Tatsuki.
Yes, she often now will play the role of Sophie in productions of Elizabeth and very similar things. Once again, brilliantly, but just very different from how you would imagine them as otokoyaku.
Yeah, definitely. Carol and I saw Grand Hotel together a few months ago, which was great. And we were talking about one of the most surprising roles was Juri Sakiho's, which is a very sort of shy, reserved, secretly, well, not so secretly in love with her mistress type role. She does have a very powerful song in it where she's kind of like alone in a room and you finally see her express her true feelings, but it's a very reserved, downtrodden type character. And Juri's just this ridiculous, bubbly person in real life. I think, well, she was very versatile when she was still in a Tokuyaku. I think did she spend all of her last years in Senka? I think she
she graduated in Senka.
So especially towards the end, she's a very powerful voice, and she just played a lot of different types of roles that called for a powerful singing voice. But then I think what most people probably know her for now is her talk show on Sky Stage. Is that still running, or
she just recently got a new one, I think?
Yeah, it usually happens every few years, and she has different iterations. But to give an example, like in one of her previous shows, it was her for a while talking to this animated fish in addition to the guest stars. Does anyone else remember Mambo-kun?
Yes.
I don't think I know about Mambo-kun.
I'll try to see if I can find a picture.
We'll put that on the blog. But she's hilarious. These are very fun, lighthearted shows.
Yes, she did for a while for this YouTube channel, also kind of like a thing where she would interview people behind the scenes theater interviews. And there was one of her interviewing Adam Kay, who she knew from back in the Takarazuka days, during, I think it was Sunset Boulevard. And it was just the two of them full on speaking in Osaka dialect and being the most ridiculous possible people in the world. And then to see her go from that to this mousy personality on stage, it was such a shock.
Yeah. She was fantastic, though.
Yes, no, she was amazing.
It's hard to pick a favorite part of that show, and maybe I'll talk a little more about it later, but she's a really strong contender for a favorite part of that show. So, sort of on the same train as surprising different roles, I think the first time an otokoyaku transitions into her quote-unquote real actress career, which I think is literally what they call it, which is a little sad. Yeah. But it's always a little odd to see, and it seems like early roles fall into one of two categories. It's either she wants to make a statement about her transition and takes on a very sort of surprisingly feminine role or a surprisingly sexy role, or the first couple roles are like a big commentary on how transitional that phase is. And Becca, you were mentioning that Kirian was her first role My Fair Lady after leaving Takarazuka?
I think she had a concert before then, but her first debut was My Fair Lady.
So yeah, that's a very different role from that of Mino Tokuyaku in Takarazuka. And then for another example, so Kazuho's first big non-concert role after graduating was in The Mystery of Edwin Drood, where she just played an otokoyaku again.
Complete with jokes from the actual show, making commentary on her being an otokoyaku.
Right. So it was The Mystery of Edwin Drood. I think this was my happy thing back in like the Komori episode or something.
Oh yeah,
so
I remember
may have already talked about this a little bit, but The Mystery of Edwin Drood is an audience participation murder mystery, and in addition to the audience participation, it's very much like self-aware. Like the narrator is constantly telling you like, hey, we're in a play, isn't that funny? and they're stopping and they're talking to each other and they're making intentional mistakes and stuff like that. So there was a lot of joking around, like, I mean, I know what it looks like, but we promise she's left that theater company across the street. This was in Theater Clie, which is directly across the street from the Tokyo Takarazuka Theater. So that's a very much like, haha, I was in otokoyaku and now I'm not, kind of.
And I think she even says it at a certain point. I think she even mentioned, like, of character, she goes, if I wanted to continue playing men, I would have just stayed at the theater across the street.
Yeah, before she storms off in her Osaka grandma clothes.
Oh, that was a good show.
That was such a good show. It was so funny. You see a lot of them start off with things on their own terms. Like they'll either do some kind of weird solo, I don't know, dance music show where they can kind of do whatever they want and only their fans are there. So it's sort of a comfort zone thing. Or it's a concert where they just have to put on a pretty dress and everyone's going to ooh and ah and then they can sing. And
but even that is a little bit of a stepping stone. You know, that often it'll be like, okay, well, she grew her hair out and maybe she wears one dress, but she's mostly going to wear these kind of nice pantsuits and still look...
Do you mean Kozuki Wataru?
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of eases the transition for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I wasn't like actively around at that point, but both of Komu's first shows were, she did a solo dance singing whatever show, and then she did a dinner show in the first year after she left Takarazuka, and both of them were just so heavily like, who am I? I'm changing. Look, I'm not wearing a dress. Look, I'm wearing a dress.
But then shortly after that, she did Kiss of the Spider-Woman, which strikes me as a very, okay, I'm going to make a statement. I'm a woman now.
Yeah, definitely. That was in the same year. Yeah, I think that definitely falls under the category of surprising different roles for former otokoyaku.
I think you also have the ones that go straight into just playing male roles in regular theater, either because that's just what they like to do, or because I assume for some of them, like people like Yumihiro, who is really, really tall, it must be hard to find the quote-unquote traditional female roles in regular theater, just because she's not the type. She's played like male roles in Moon Saga, and I think the Naruto show was also a male role, which is, I mean, it's great. She's making use of her acting abilities. Or people like Otosuki Kei, who play both the male and female roles in 12 Night, using like her otokoyaku training to just like give it all.
I'm just gonna do everything better than everybody.
Yeah, as always.
Carly, you're a fan of an OG. Have you ever heard them comment about trying to purposefully not wear high heels so as to not, be taller than their co-stars? I saw a production of Thoroughly Modern Millie with Shibiki Jun and Judy Sakiho, which was great, but I do remember noticing, oh yeah, those guys are taller, and I'm not sure how much of that was very purposeful casting choices.
So my OG doesn't have that problem because she's super tiny, but that kind of reminds me of, again, from Grand Hotel, Kozuki Wataru was playing a character, I guess, I don't know if it was really a character. She was playing the everyone's favorite incarnation of death dancing in the background, which I don't believe was present in other productions of Grand Hotel.
No, it was a role created specially, I think, to get her into that show.
Yeah. So they invented this role for her, and she just she would lurk and dance in the background more and more and more and more as things went downhill because she was deaf, and then in the end she was everywhere. But there's this one scene, and the lead role was played by, what is his name? Akinori what? He's so famous. Oh, I hate that I don't remember. Super popular actor right now. We will put it on the blog. He's really short, really, really short. And there's this scene where most of the cast members are lined up, and he has to take a piece of paper or a ticket or something from each of them, and they're all standing with their hands up in the air holding this thing, and he goes down the line and takes it, and he gets to Wataru last, and he has to jump to reach her hands because she's super tall and in heels, and he's super tiny. I don't know about actual height, but I think in her heels she was the tallest cast member.
Yes. Yes.
Even amongst the normal height dudes. Not. I don't know how tall Akinori is, but he's not tall. So I think in that particular situation, because she was not really playing, she was essentially playing like a goddess. Mm-hmm. She was playing something supernatural. So I think having her be an inhuman size was a benefit. And certainly in that moment, it added comedic value. But yeah, I can totally see that being a thing where the taller actresses have to be very conscious of how they dress themselves so as not to overpower their male counterparts in the cast.
I remember when the Moon Saga show was announced, and they did this live stream press conference thing, and Gak, who was the main role and actually wrote the show and directed everything, he was asked about the other co-stars, including Yumi Hiro, who had recently graduated and who is really, really tall. And I just remember, I forget whether she was wearing heels or not. I think she might not have been wearing heels. But I just remember him standing next to her and just kind of sort of looking up slyly and just going, yeah, she's taller than I thought she would be.
What I was going to say is that sometimes the opposite happens, where the otokoyaku who were maybe just on the verge of getting assigned to be otokoyaku and who are listed at 167 centimeters, but are kind of...
167 is the height you list when you're lying.
Yeah, and so some of them it's well, yes, I knew that, so it's kind of funny. And also I gotta give credit to the Musumeyaku, because so much of what they do is make their partners look tall.
Yes. Yeah. Which was funny, with Ichinana Hataku, I saw the cast with Misaka in it. And one of, I did not see, she was playing with Kato Kazuki when I saw her, who is really tall. But I saw cast pictures of her with Koike Teppei, who is not as tall. And she was having trouble making him look tall.
Speaking of Musumeyaku, we sadly don't really see as many of them in leading roles in theater after Takarazuka as we do otokoyaku making the transition to being quote-unquote normal actresses. You see more making the transition to movies and TV and doing well. For example, the two who came to mind immediately were Kuroki Hitomi and Don Rei, who are both now, I would say, household names in Japan, whereas even most very popular otokoyaku are kind of more, I think, niche popularity among fans of Takarazuka. But they're just, it's a little sad. I know Hanafusa Mari does fine because she's Hanafusa Mari. But...
Yeah, there were a few that managed to break out, but it's kind of too bad that they end up having to compete with the otokoyaku for these female roles. And so I think that's part of why it was so exciting when the most recent Elizabeth cast was announced, and it was Hanafusa Mari and Rano Hana, that the Musumeyaku actually got to, win for once.
Yeah, I think it's the first time that we got four Musumeyaku playing Elizabeth.
Yep, it was in a Toho production. I remember when they announced that, I thought to myself, Hana's playing it again. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, that's actually never happened outside of Takarazuka. And that was the first moment that I realized that the Toho Elizabeths have only ever been former otokoyaku. So yeah, that was really interesting. And really, really cool for Rano Hana, who was the split cast member, getting such an incredible role so soon after retiring from Takarazuka, when, you know, Ohana took all those Elizabeths and all those years after retiring to break into the Toho Elizabeth scene. So that's really cool, a really big statement for her.
It's not never. You do sometimes see former Musumeyaku who land those kinds of roles, like Kazune Mio, who was never a top star but was a very successful Sotogumi Musumeyaku. She's done pretty well for herself. Like, she had the lead in Rudolph the Last Kiss, and she's played Fantine a number of times in Les Mis, so there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, the former otokoyaku do dominate the scene.
You have also recently Daigo Seshiru, who, like, really post-graduation also started announcing all the shows she was going to be in pretty big roles as well, which for a non-former top Musumeyaku is really amazing.
She's an interesting case because she was an otokoyaku, so even though she transitioned to being a musumeyaku, she kind of has those otokoyaku years behind her. Like, she graduated in her 14th, 13th year in the review or something like that, whereas I think most musumeyaku, even top musumeyaku, end up retiring with much, much fewer years of Takarazuka experience under them. And I don't think that is a product of anything that has to do with them or a statement of their talent. It's just how the Takarazuka system works, but it could also be a factor in the kinds of roles that they get after leaving. I know culturally Japan is very seniority based, so that could certainly be a factor. But both Yumesaki Nene, who is going by Akane Nana now, and Manaka Ayu have been showing up in a lot of stuff in the short time since they've left Takarazuka, which is nice to see.
Yeah, I think Nene announced Sunset Boulevard like 4 days after, or like the day after title.
Yeah, whenever they announce something so quickly, I'm both surprised and happy. I can't believe they don't want to take like a 6-month vacation. Especially Nene, who had that long, grueling top star career. Yeah. I'm happy to see them still acting on stage. So, OG fandom life.
So I was the one who requested this topic, as Hokusho Kairi will be retiring soon, and this is going to be my life in about 6 months, so I really wanted to hear what Carly had to say about what's it like when they become OGs.
So, it varies really wildly, based on their personality, based on how put together their fan club was when they were in Takarazuka, based on their age. I think if you're a fan of recent retirees or people who are going to retire soon, it's going to be interesting to see how the OG fan participation scene kind of changes in coming years, because, for example, we're seeing this huge flood of non-top retirees on social media, and top retirees too, more so the Musumeyaku than the Otokoyaku, but I mean, it seems like everyone who retires from Takarazuka nowadays is looking at their watch, waiting for it to strike midnight so they can launch their Instagram.
For which we're really grateful.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that we have that opportunity. Just even in Chicago, seeing all the cast pictures. Like, I get that Hankyu has its reasons for not allowing current members, but it is really, really fun to see the social media.
It's so fun. So it's a little bit of a step back from that for people who retired more of a while ago. I'll use my fan club as an example. I think its primary function is a ticket ordering service. Like, I am in clubs, so if I'm going to Japan and there's any chance that tickets will be difficult to get, I know I have a ticket. And it doesn't even really work the same way as it does in Takarazuka, I think, where if you're in a fan club and you buy tickets, typically you pay some extra money in support of the actress and the fan club operating expenses. It's, at least for me, I don't think it's really like that. It's just a fan perk. Like, she gets tickets and she gives them to us, so we have tickets.
I think a lot of the OG fan clubs are also managed, not all, but I think many of them are managed by agencies, which is part of the difference.
Yeah, some of them definitely are. Mine operates independently, but there definitely are both. Another really common thing is a members only blog. Like, I log into Komu's blog with my fan club number and it's not public. So that's a nice perk. Because a lot of the fan activities that fans of current Takarazuka actresses are used to, like everyday irimachi and demachi and tea parties and fan events. Even among the people who really like to keep doing that stuff, it decreases dramatically in their OG careers, with the decrease in the volume of shows. Even workaholics like Komu and Mizu and Wataru are not doing the volume of shows annually that a Takarazuka actress will do. So having something like a members only blog, I think, is a perk to make up for some of that stuff. Fan events, like I was just saying, vary wildly. A lot of actresses still have them. A lot have them very, very rarely. A lot don't have them at all. It really depends on your actress's personality and just what she likes to do. Irimachi, demachi is a lot more dependent on the rules of the theater than what the actress wants to do. In my experience, I mean, you never wait outside during rehearsal like you do in Takarazuka. Sometimes, if it's a smaller show, they'll have irimachi. In my experience, has not been a thing at all. Demachi, if it's a smaller show, is sometimes every day. Sometimes it's only on the last day. If it's a show with a lot of OG, often it's banned altogether. But again, I think that varies with the actresses too. There are definitely some who I've heard from friends still like to do it as much as possible, and will still talk to you and go through the whole thing. It's not so much a time to hand over letters like it is in Takarazuka. Most of the actresses, when they do an OG performance, will have a reception desk, and you leave your presents and your gifts with your club staff at the beginning of the show. And then if there's demachi, you just kind of chill and talk, or depending on who your person is, just wave as her taxi goes by.
I will share one experience. This was back in 2007, way, way, way before my fan club days. But I went to see the early modern Millie, which with Shibuki Jun in it. And I did wait after the show, and I did, stand with the rest of the little old ladies, and I was able to give Rika a letter, and my heart just melted. So, so that was kind of my one OG fan experience, and that was as a non-Shibuki Jun club member. But it was, I'm sure there are clubs that are much more strict, but at least in that case, the women there were, very, amused that I was a foreigner, and, happy to, facilitate me, not screwing up as I was giving this letter to Rika.
Yeah, and I was just about to say that, and I'm sure there are people for whom this is not the case, but in my experience, the rules are a lot more relaxed. I mean, you still want to be polite and respectful and all that good stuff, but for example, Lisa has just hung out with me at Demachi because we were both there and it was fine. I think I think the club staff prefers to collect letters and presents at the beginning, but if it's a situation where you're either not in the club or you didn't know and there is demachi, they're not going to be like, no, you can't give her your letter. I think they're going to be nice about it. So yeah, it's not like we have an appointed time to meet at this place. It happens to be the fan club members who tend to know if there's going to be demachi and where it's going to be. But if you're there and you see people waiting for somebody who you like, usually you can either just straight up join them or kind of loiter near them with no problems.
I do think that clubs that are like bigger might have a little bit more rules. At least I remember seeing Sokazuho's club. I think it was at Theatre Clear when they were doing Edwin Drood. And they looked very organized.
Yeah, I think that's another difference between the recent retirees and people who retired a bit longer ago is the ones who retired yesterday are still going to have very active, hungry fans, and they're going to need the mechanism to deal with them. Whereas, people 10 years out, we're kind of like, okay, if she looks at us, we'll be happy. The other annoying thing is last minute announcements. Usually for really big productions, like if someone's going to be in a Toho show or an Umeda Arts show or something else big, it'll come out at least 6 months in advance. I think I remember when they did Chicago in 2014, it started in October or it may have started in November, and they announced it in February of that year. So that's a fair gap. I have also bought a plane ticket whose price I am embarrassed to reveal on the public internet for a show that was announced like a month before it was happening. So depending on how madly in love you are with your star, you may have to either have a lot of extra money saved up for emergencies or be really secure in yourself about missing things that sound really, really good if you're not in Japan, or even if you're in Japan, right, Carol?
Yeah. I keep on telling myself that I'm going to have all this extra money for non-Takarazuka things after Michan's retirement, but I have a feeling that no, it's still going to go to her.
Yeah, I mean, looked out. My OG does not have an active career right now, but she did call up one of those surprise. Oh, I'm having a surprise concert in Osaka in 2 weeks. I'm yeah, that's fine. I'm in Japan, but I'm nowhere near Osaka, and I don't have the money to go there again. I already have plans in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so that's a little rough.
Yeah,
but mostly I try and be happy with the fact that she's still working so much because a lot of people's favorites don't.
Yeah.
And Carol, I like how you said you're lucky that she doesn't have an active career, because I totally understand that sentiment.
It saves me a lot of money.
Yeah. On one hand, you miss her and you wish you could see her as much as possible, but on the other hand, it's like, oh god, if you would just take a year off, my life would be so much easier.
I can't imagine how Mizu Natsuki and Kosuke Wataru fans deal, because they never stop. There's it's always something.
And they are two people who I've heard from friends and acquaintances are still very active with their fans, doing events and stuff. And Wataru retired 10 years ago, and she's still doing that.
I don't think Wataru got a memo that she retired, though.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm old.
I know. Isn't it scary? But so Mizu is 6 years ago now, which is still a little scary, but she does not slow down. If she is not in 2 shows simultaneously, it's a break for her. And she still does a lot of talk shows. She still does a lot of fan stuff. She's good to her fans.
I feel like just about all former otokoyaku, for at least a good number of years, unless there's health, or no, excuse me, not former otokoyaku top stars, they end up doing something. How frequent it is up for grabs, but I feel like, there's never been an otokoyaku top star that I can remember that just disappeared off the face of the earth after graduation.
Yeah, so we thought it would be nice to give a little bit of insight to the best of our memories into some of the OG shows that we have seen that have not made it to any sort of distributable filmed footage and are thus gone forever, sadly. So we already touched on some of them a little bit, so maybe I'll start with something that we didn't touch on yet. There is this Dance Legend series that pops up every once in a while. And Carol, you just saw, I keep just calling it Flamenco Cafe, but the full title is Dance Legend Volume 3 Flamenco Cafe Delgado. I think it's even longer. I think after that it's like Bad Girls Meets Flamenco Boys or something. And 2 years ago I saw a show called Argentango, which was also in the same series. That was Bad Girls Meets Tango Boys. So the bad girls are usually Mizu, Wataru, and somebody. And the bad boys vary dramatically, but nobody's going to these shows for the bad boys. Let's be real. Although I have to say, the boys they imported from Argentina for Argentango did not make me hate the fact that they were touching the girls. they were as much as I can consider a boy tasty, they were very, very tasty boys.
No, the boys from Spain for the flamenco show were also like very nice to look at, and they were excellent dancers, which made it easy to accept the fact that like one of them got to lift Wataru up.
Yeah. You probably have to import a boy to get somebody who can lift Wataru up. So Argentango was Wataru and Mizu and Ayabuki Mao. And
Ozuki Toma was in one of the recent ones. No, that was in...
Ozuki Toma was in the flamenco.
Okay.
Yeah, which Carol just thought. Carol, do you remember the name of the woman who is always in these, who I think does part of the choreography?
Damn it, I know her name. I know,
me too. And she's really short, and I can picture her perfectly, and she's an awesome dancer.
Damn it, I know her name.
I don't remember her name. So we may have to put this one in the blog. We're super good at preparing. But yeah, Argentango was super fun. It was just, it was really sexy. The dancing was incredible. I mean, both the OG in the show and the other two dancers, the other two female dancers, and then the Argentinian boys were just outstanding. And there was sort of a plot, like each character, each dancer was supposed to have her own little storyline that was going on, and relationships with the other characters, but it was mostly just dancing through expression. Was flamenco also like that?
Yeah, flamenco was the first act, was like this storyline based. They actually wrote in the program a little bit what like the characters were that they were playing. And it was mostly revolved between this forbidden love story between Wataru and one of the boys, with the only Japanese man playing Wataru's brother, who was jealous and did not approve of the relationship, and the other characters just kind of dancing around them. It was really interesting to see this story told through dance, because you could tell what was happening, like even though you were not sure who the people were, like whether they were, how they were related to each other, you could tell, okay, you're in love with this person, and this person disapproves, and this person has this kind of role. It was really cool.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things about Argentango too, was how clearly everything came across just through dance and their general like emoting and body language. It was really cool, and it was a really interesting challenge for some of them. Like, for example, Wataru's character, I'm pretty sure was either in like, she had the most I guess subdued storyline, or like I forget if she was in like an abusive relationship or something, but you think of her based on her history as, you know, the sexy, aggressive one, and it was very much the opposite in Argentango, and it was really cool to see her tackle that challenge. Mizu lost her shoe. That's the thing that remember the most about it.
I was so disappointed that there was no Mizu accident when I saw flamenco.
In the middle of the dance, she just kicked off her shoe and straight up finished the dance on her tiptoes. She was wearing super high heels, super high, and it looked really, really treacherous to finish that dance, but she did it somehow. And then in the talk show, she apologized that she figured everyone was probably worried about her instead of watching the dance. She didn't mean to disturb the whole. But that's my most memorable part of the show.
By the way,
other than like,
I remember the other dancer's name is Harada Kaoru.
Yes, good job. Thank you. I was thinking it was now something, but I think that was the other dancer in Argentango, and I don't think she was in flamenco. How was Ozaki Toma? Since this was this her first thing since graduating Takarazuka?
It wasn't her first, but it's one of the earlier ones.
But I think this was the first, show where she used most of her Takarazuka, or some of her Takarazuka training. And it was really interesting to see her, especially because, how can I put this? She and Wataru were taller than the rest of the cast put together.
Yeah, they're large.
And it was really interesting to see her play, because I've heard that, one of her first shows after retirement was, I think, this police show where she played this kind of, masculine type detective, the bossy woman. And in this show, she was required to play, a more feminine, not necessarily demure, but, definitely, she had to manage to, work the skirts and, work the veils and stuff like that. And the cast spent 1 month, I think, in Madrid, rehearsing for the show, which is not enough time to, master a new dance at all. But I was really surprised at how much her body language had changed. In the background, there were times when she would still pull the otokoyaku pose and tell the man off.
Hard habits to break in that little time.
Which I think the fans were probably delighted to see, this little, bits of otokoyaku-ness still coming out. But while she was dancing, it was really amazing to see how her body language had changed. How she was... I was flabbergasted, to be honest, to see in how such a short time she managed to dance from the opposite side, basically, take something that she was not trained to do, she's always been trained to lead and to be, the dude, and to, change that around, which must not be easy to do.
Yeah.
Actually, that brings up a good point. This is kind of backtracking to an earlier topic, but a lot of them, I think, after they graduate, they're able to sing in their natural ranges, so I feel like many of them just improve as performers because they have to learn new skills, or they get to do something in a way that's just much more natural than it was. Many otokoyaku have to force their voices much lower than is really natural for them.
Yeah, I have noticed several people who I've seen live, mostly in these big anniversary celebration medley OG specials that have a lot of former stars in them. On several occasions, I was surprised to hear certain people's voices live in the theater, and how much better they were than what I remember them being from watching Takarazuka videos. So that's definitely, I think they take their strengths from their Takarazuka training, but become more well-rounded in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Becca, do you want to talk about Mozart a little bit more? I know that's a really popular show.
Is it okay if I do Man of La Mancha instead? Yeah. Just because I feel like the one thing I will say about Mozart is that, and I mean this in the best of ways, that Hana Fusamari is a vampire. She doesn't look like she's aged a day, and she was great.
It's really incredible.
And I've already talked about it a little bit. But Man of La Mancha, that was an interesting production because it's kind of a weird show to begin with. It's all about Don Quixote and his travels, and Don Quixote is a man with delusions who comes into this inn and begins kind of changing the world around him. So, I think I really like seeing Kirian in it. I didn't love the production as a whole just because the guy who played Don Quixote, and I don't remember his name, because he was supposed to be this old crazy man, a lot of his lines were mumbled, so for someone who doesn't, Japanese is not my first language to begin with, it was kind of hard to understand what he was saying.
I feel your pain. I feel like, honestly, that's a huge problem I have in a lot of OG shows. Like, whenever Japanese men are speaking, I understand so much less of it than I do when women are speaking, for some reason.
I wonder why.
Yeah. But to talk specifically about Kirian's performance, it cracked me up a little bit because it was the first time I had seen her live since about 2009, and in a lot of ways she just hadn't changed, even though she was wearing a dress. I mean, she plays this prostitute character who Don Quixote falls in love with and he thinks is some great lady. And so, in a lot of ways she was just playing, not Adelaide, because Adelaide is very ditzy, but she was playing very much so otokoyaku Kiriya Hiromu in a dress. That being said, one thing that I thought was really interesting, and I'm wondering if other people had experiences like this, that I felt like Kirian was toning down her charisma, whereas otokoyaku, especially otokoyaku top stars, have this just very magnetic charisma, and I think it was a smart decision, and it wouldn't have been appropriate for the role, but I definitely felt like she kind of changed the tone of what she was doing to better match the show.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm trying to think if I've had that experience. I feel like the first show I ever saw live in Japan was Anything Goes, which had Senna-jun in it. And it was good, and it was fun, and her role was really fun, but I kind of felt that way too, that I got the impression she was holding back. And I don't know if I don't know if it's about like big expressions, especially in Japanese culture, being associated with masculinity, and they think they have to tone it down to appear more feminine, or like, I don't know where it comes from. It could even just be director feedback. It could not be coming from them at all. But I did get that impression that she could have been a lot brighter, and well, not a lot. I mean, she was pretty bright and energetic, but I have seen her be brighter and more energetic, and it was certainly a role that would have allowed for more of that, I think.
I can definitely see that with something like Anything Goes. I guess, and in some shows, though, because I feel like that kind of being very, look at me, that magnetism is very Takarazuka aesthetic, so sometimes that doesn't always match.
No, I think so. I think that, especially when they're not playing one of the lead roles, when they're playing like something a little bit to the side, when they're not supposed to attract everyone's attention.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
But I've only been able to see a handful of OG shows, but they are really fun. And for me, I'm 10 years a Takarazuka fan now, and oftentimes I just end up feeling really old. I remember I saw Mizu's first show as a Takarajian, and now it's been 6 years. So it can be nice watching OG shows, because it just feels like, oh, okay, we're back in my era now.
Yeah. Carol, do you want to talk about one of your other shows that you saw?
Yeah, one show I wanted to mention that I saw recently was Osage County, which is based on the film by the same name, which had Asamire as, I guess, she would be the main character, and Otosuki Kei as one of the minor female characters. What made the show really different, special for me, is that this was the first OG show that I saw that was not a musical, it was a regular play.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a very different kind of acting and performance that I'm used to seeing from OGs, because there was no dancing, there was no singing, they had to just like do it all with like normal acting, and like appearing as, I guess, as common as possible, as relatable as possible, without suddenly bursting into song about the feelings. And like, it was my first time seeing Asamire live. One of my first times ever seeing her at all, since the Topstar era was a really long time ago. And I was amazed because she's retired a long time ago, and like she walks on stage, and it's impossible not to look at her. She has such a strong presence, and so much power and gravity in her acting. As she was playing, like the story is about a family, a very dysfunctional family. His father commits suicide, like the head of the family commits suicide, and that brings out all this crap that happens in the family when they all get together. And her role was the mother, who is addicted to medication. Like she has, I guess, a form of depression. She is drunk a lot of the time. She was playing as this person who is very, at least mentally, very unstable. And it was amazing to see how she handled that kind of acting, how she went from being like this, at times a sort of strong woman, and then suddenly like falling on the floor and like crying like a child because something's not going her way. It was amazing to just watch that. And Otosuke Kei, who I seen for the first time 2 years ago, Black Mary Poppins, which was a musical. Like in Black Mary Poppins, because in Black Mary Poppins there were some flashback scenes, and she got to play her character as a child. As a child, she got to do this otokoyaku stuff, like pissing up her brothers and like yelling, like she had like the body language of otokoyaku. And this show in August Osage County, she was just like 110% the vapid young lady who is obsessed with the idea of love and marriage as something that will fulfill her life. Like, that uses the idea of marriage as something that will solve all her problems, which was a really big change from everything I've seen her do before. So she only appears, I think she only appeared in the beginning of the second act. It was a 3-act show. And, like, she starts off like just, like, talking non-stop about her fiancé in this very cheerful tone, and just, like, long hair and high heels and skirt, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? But she was so great because you can see, like, as the play progressed, like, there was this other depth beneath her, like, as the family things come out, like, the problems in the family come out, the ones relating to her. There was so much, like, hidden depth that, well, like, slowly came out, and it was amazing to see her get the chance to act this way, to see them both, like, act this way, because it's not something that they would have gotten as much chance to do in Takarazuka, or in most OG shows for that matter, because not that many of them go into, like, doing straight plays, and it's not many of the top stars, former top stars.
I don't want to put Takarazuka down, because God knows I love it at the, from the very, very bottom of my heart, but sometimes when I see OG shows, I'm just reminded that I want to say that what they get to do there is higher quality, because that's not really fair, but they do get to go deeper than you do in a lot of typical Takarazuka shows.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think because Takarazuka does have the kind of formula, the kind of, not say checklist, but they do have, like, the aesthetic that they very rarely break off from, and it's part of its charm, it's part of what makes Takarazuka. But I do love seeing OG shows, is to see them do, like, something completely different, and, like, develop a different side of themselves.
Yeah, I think not only is it amazing to see the full breadth of their talents, but then there is that kind of surprise factor of, like, oh, she can do that? And it's amazing. I would love to see Asami Rei in something. Like, she's just she's one of the OGs that is just this, like, huge, ridiculous, like, intense presence to me. She has so much, just, like, never mind stage presence, just, like, life presence. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, if I could be 1/100th that badass as I grow older, I would be really happy.
No, like, my life goal is to be like them when I get older. It's not gonna happen, but I can be.
Especially because she's not somebody who, Becca was just saying that Ohana is a vampire, and has not aged a day since she was 19 or whatever. Asami Rei is super not a vampire. She's just an incredibly awesome, distinguished old lady.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's amazing.
Yeah, she's definitely one of those powerhouses that she just dominates the stage when she comes up, even when she was having her weak moments as a character, like, not necessarily weak, but, like, the moments when she was unwell. And it was still like such a powerful expression that she did not fade in the background or anything like that. Like, even when she was not on stage, you could still kind of feel her lurking backstage somewhere.
Yeah. I think I want to talk about Grand Hotel a little more than I have already, because I really, really liked it.
By the way, Carly, could you let us know in Grand Hotel if any of these OGs are... I forget what the Tsukimi Top Combis, who they're going to be playing, but I'd be curious how it compares and how they'll slot in.
Oh, well, let me bring up the cast list.
I seem to remember that the main character in the Takarazuka version is wildly different. Like, it's one of the bigger characters in the regular production, but it's definitely not the main character in the bigger production.
So I was a little surprised by that. Like, in I opened the 1993 one. That's helpful. So yeah, when we saw Grand Hotel, Carol and I went together on the same day. So when we saw Grand Hotel, the two leads were very equally billed. Okay, this is interesting. Oh, great. Okay, so there were two dudes. One of them was Akinori. I can't remember his last name. I'm going to put it on the blog.
Poor guy.
Yeah, who I was talking about before, and he plays one of the leads, which is his name is Otto. He's a Jewish man who is dying, and I'm so bad at pronouncing words. German names is what I should say. And then the other lead is this Baron, Felix von something.
Do you want me to pronounce it for you? No, it's okay. People can look it up.
We'll link it in the blog, along with the other actor's name, who I don't remember. But I really liked the guy who played Baron Felix von something.
If it was not obvious, we were not there for the man.
But that said, I thought everybody did a really good job, and I was pleased with the cast as a whole.
Yes.
So of those two roles, I felt like the Baron was slightly the lead. Like, they were pretty close to equally billed. And then when I heard, or somebody told me, I was talking with a friend who suggested, like, because of the connection, the odds that Takarazuka would be doing Grand Hotel next year were pretty high. So, we started thinking, who's going to get it? And then Moontroop got it. And then I looked up the previous time Takarazuka did Grand Hotel, which was in 1993, also Moontroop starring Suzukaze Mayo. And the reason I was just surprised and caught off guard and lost my train of thought looking up this cast list was the roles are flipped. So Suzukaze Mayo played Otto, and I remember when I first looked that up, I was surprised because I thought he wasn't the lead. But I'm looking at the 2017 cast list, and Tamaki Ryo is playing the Baron, not Otto. And
so they changed it.
Lee is playing Otto, which I think is going to be a really interesting challenge for her. Because Otto is a very tiny, squirrely, sickly little stuttering kind of character. So
not Miyaruri.
But wow, that'll be really, really interesting to see what she does with that character. I'm really interested to see what they do with the Takarazuka production as a whole, honestly, because Grand Hotel that we saw was 2.5 hours straight through with no intermission.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was, I think that's the style of it is very much, I don't want to say one of those pretentious things where the background is the character, but the style was very much kind of a leading role in the show. There was this very frenetic atmosphere, you're tired by the end of it.
Yeah, I think that putting a pause in the middle of it would have broken the flow of the story, would have ruined the atmosphere a bit. But I do very vividly remember, I think Carly commented it as well, that moment when you're like halfway through, like past halfway through, and you look at your watch and you're like, oh boy, there's not going to be a break.
So, I mean, this is a 2.5-hour musical, and it both in 1993 when Takarazuka did it the first time, and now that they're doing it next year, they've paired it with a review. So I imagine they're going to be making significant cuts and changes to it anyway. So I guess that could involve any number of changes to the characters. But the OGs who I went to see this show for were Anjumira, who I love.
Who destroyed us both very thoroughly.
The first time, I mean, I love her era of Hanagumi in general. I wish I could get my hands on more of her shows because I love early 90s Hanagumi. But I love her. I love and hate her for the dances she's responsible for as a choreographer.
Hot Eyes.
Hot Eyes and the Rose Dance from Dream Kingdom and just pretty much everything that thoroughly destroyed me very early on in my Takarazuka career. If I rewatch it for the first time in years now and then watch the credits roll, I see Anju in all caps and I'm like, oh.
Right. So I guess we should say that she is also a choreographer for the review.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
And she's often just listed as Anju.
Yeah.
Yeah, so most recently she choreographed a scene mostly between Makazu Suzuho, Rei Miurata, and Asaka Manato in the Hot Ice review, which was fairly life-ruining.
Fairly. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it must be so intimidating for the Seito to have a former top star who is directing them.
Yeah. So she played Elisabetta, who is an aging former prima ballerina, who is...
Except she forgot the aging part.
She's traveling broke with some, I guess, her manager or some staff people and her dressing lady, Raffaella, who is played by Juri, who is Juri Sakiho, who we talked a little bit about before. And they're trying to convince her not to cancel an upcoming performance she has because they need the money so badly. But her last performance tanked and she was humiliated and she doesn't want to go on stage, and that's kind of her storyline. Juri's character, who is Elisabetta's sort of lady-in-waiting who is in love with her, in the new version is split cast between Akatsuki Chise and Asami Jun, who are continuing to battle it out, I guess.
I hate to say it, but that seems like a storyline that will be cut.
Yeah. Well, the characters in there, I mean, I wonder, I'm curious to see what they do with it. Because the character's in there and it's the, like, future Nibante battle going on. So...
Yeah, they're going to have to do something.
Yeah, based on Juri's performance, this is turning into a not so OG episode suddenly, but that's okay. Based on Juri's performance, I don't know about Chise, but we'll see, I guess.
Is it explicitly that she's in love with her, or is it more implied? It's
pretty explicit. I mean,
okay.
She has a song where she like smells her clothes and stuff.
Okay. It's like, let's say, very strongly implied. If you close your eyes and close your ears, you might miss it.
So then there's a love story between the Baron and Elisabetta, which started off as the Baron trying to rob her and ended in, well, it started as, I have to pretend I'm your fan and in love with you so you don't catch me stealing your necklace, and ended in, no, we're really actually in love with each other. So it looks like coming up, that's going to be the top combi because Chappie is playing Elisabetta.
That would be interesting.
I hope they actually have her dance. My biggest disappointment about the OG, it's not an OG production, the regular production of Grand Hotel was that they didn't actually ever show Anjumira dancing, which is a crime.
Oh,
yeah.
The first time I ever saw her live was in Dream a Dream in 2013, where she did this this sort of tango show by herself where she's in this like tiny little red dress with a giant slit up her whole leg, and then she kicks off her shoes and finishes it barefoot. And I just, from the little I had seen of her Hanagumi era shows before that, I fell so madly in love with her during Dream a Dream that I was so excited to have the opportunity to see her again in Grand Hotel, and it was so disappointing that she didn't get to dance, but she was fabulous.
But her acting was so good,
yeah,
though.
Carol was saying how Asami Rei has this presence where she walks on stage and it's like, look at me, and no one else on stage is important for a minute. And I think despite maybe being the tiniest top otokoyaku of all time, Anjumira has the same presence. She just shuts the stage down when she's on it, to me at least.
And it really suited the character as well.
It did really suit her character. She was very, very dignified. I'm so bad with names of people I don't know. Grand Hotel was a split cast production. There was a green team and a red team, and all of the Takarazuka OG were on the green team, so that's what we saw. The red team's Elizabetta was the very famous ballerina who starred in the movie Shall We Dance?
Oh, yeah.
Who I think is a lot more of a household name in Japan. So I mean, I didn't see the red team at all. I assume they did quite well. And I was pleased to see Anjumira up against that kind of star power, presumably, you know, doing awesome.
And something else that's interesting to mention about Grand Hotel is they have these two teams, but they also, I didn't see the red team either, but they changed the story between the two versions.
Interesting.
So you had like two different casts, but also two different versions of Grand Hotel.
There's a lot of gimmicks in OG shows, I find, to try and like trick hardcore fans into seeing the show as many times as humanly possible.
Well, not only that, because like the OGs were all in the same cast, so if you saw that once, it was sad, like we were. But I noticed that a lot of regular like musical theater does that, the double casting of people. It's also so they can get some rest, obviously, but it's also a way of attracting more people. If you like cast two famous actresses, one of them will attract fans.
Definitely.
Actually, and also, it took me an embarrassing long time to figure this out, but often you'll see it as W cast, and it took me the longest time to figure out that means double cast.
Me too. I figured out pretty immediately that W cast meant double cast, but it took me really long to figure out why. And it's like, oh, the Japanese pronunciation of double is that. Silly. So Anjumira was fantastic in Grand Hotel. And then Juri we mentioned, and then Wataru we started mentioning, who was, I guess her character is not going to be in the Takarazuka version because it was invented just for this. Speaking of gimmicks,
one hasn't ever stopped Takarazuka.
She was on both teams. She didn't have any lines. She just lurked in the background, and every time she came on stage, she would like sort of show up and then tiptoe across the stage and then leave, and it just drove me crazy. I was sat there thinking like, oh God, you can't just like have her not dance, right? Every scene that went by when she didn't dance, I got like more and more anxious and kept like thinking about the time, like she has to get a dance, right? They're not gonna like make a character for Wataru and not have her dance. And then there's this big dramatic death scene at the end. I won't say who died, I guess, because there is a Takarazuka version coming up. But there's this big dramatic death scene, and she's playing death. So as soon as the shot is fired, she, descends in a flurry of limbs.
Legs.
And it ends with a hard kiss on the mouth, which is the moment that I went, because I've never seen Wataru kiss a man before. So, yeah, that was interesting. The characters that, just to finish answering Becca's question, so the other two, like the other love story, is between Ado and Frida, who is a secretary who wants to be an actress. And in the 1993 Moon Troop version, this was the top combi.
Ah, okay.
And it looks like here it is not. It is, so yeah, Miyori is going to be Otto, and Frida is split cast between Saotome Wakaba and Umino Mitsuki. So yeah, when I saw the 1993 Moon Troop cast, after I looked it up, after seeing Grand Hotel, I was surprised that was the top combi. So I assume they're gonna rewrite it, and I can definitely see them downplaying those roles and upplaying the Baron and Elisabetta. I think
that the Baron and Elisabetta is also a much more Takarazuka like combination. It has like the drama and the dancing.
Yeah. So Otto is very much not a cool role at all. Otto is Akinori, whose name I sadly, his last name I don't remember. Who, you know, he has a very big acting style. I actually saw him in two things this year. He was in DNA Sharaku, which was a weird sci-fi Nihonmono show that Koma was in. So I went to see it. Oh, that was weird. By the end, it grew on me a lot, and I kind of liked it, but it was super weird. And he was this really, really, like, to the point where every time he was on stage, I was uncomfortable, like genuinely uncomfortable. Creepy villain with like all white glazed over contacts. And I think he was supposed to be like not a robot, but some kind of artificial intelligence type being. He was definitely not human, and he definitely did not have empathy, and like his whole story.
In the Nihonmono?
Yeah, it was a sci-fi Nihonmono.
Wow, that sounds like something else.
It was on TV, so if you're, dying to see it after hearing my description, I can hook you up. But no, so he played this really, really creepy, artificially intelligent sort of villain character. And then he was on stage in Grand Hotel, and I was like, oh, you again. But he's short, and he's a really good singer, and he's a really kind of over-the-top actor, so that squirrely role fit him really well. I think he did a really good job with it. Suzuka strikes me as the type who can make anything work, or like you just like suspend all the rules for her. So I can definitely see not wanting to give that type of like super nerdy, uncool role to the top star in 2017. Yes. Especially when your top star is the second youngest top star in the history of Takarazuka, and you're probably going to be trying to do your very, very best to make her look big and cool.
You don't want to underscore the nerddiness.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. I think I personally found the plot line between Elisabetta and the Baron to be the more interesting one in the version of Grand Hotel we saw. So,
I agree.
I'm looking forward to that. It was just such a good, strong show, and I was so exhausted when it was over, but I think that's good. I think that's a good exhaustion.
I just remember when it ended, and we were just sitting there like, okay, we need a moment.
But even, like I was saying, it's so hard to pick a favorite character in that, but despite Anjumira's stage presence, and despite Wataru's just...
Legs,
yeah, that's the word I was looking for. I think for like sheer display of talent, I have to give MVP to Juri, who just was so... She got her feelings across so well in such a heart-shattering way. And interestingly, that role was originally cast to be Osa. And a few months before, she canceled all of her performances for unknown reasons, which then became known. She is now the mother of twins. Yay!
Congratulations!
Yay!
Healthy twins, I've heard. So congratulations, Osa. But so Juri stepped in to replace her, and I was looking forward to seeing Osa because I've never seen her live, and I love her singing voice, as everyone should. But I have a really hard time imagining anybody topping what Juri did with that role.
And also just the way you've described it. Juri has a very I would say, exuberant personality, and I think of Osa's presence as just being very big, so it's hard to imagine her being meek and mousy.
Yeah, I think she would have played it very differently.
Yes.
But I really, really liked Jury's interpretation.
Yeah.
So, does anybody want to talk about any other shows before we wrap up, or?
If we do, I think we might be talking forever.
Okay, there's a little bit of a taste of OG fan life. If you have any that you're specifically interested in, I guess, because it can be a lot harder to find information on these shows, especially if you don't speak Japanese. And even if you do read Japanese, often the Wikipedia articles will not be very fleshed out. And the websites for the shows typically stay up for like a few months to a year after the show and then get taken down. So if there's something you're interested in, I guess drop a comment on the blog, and we have a pretty big team. It's possible that somebody has seen it or heard of it, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit.
As a really quick note, Takarazuka On usually does stock most of these programs, so even if you can't see the show, the OG programs tend to be really nice, and they have some good photos.
Yes.
And some of these things do get released on DVD or CD. There are more CDs than there are DVDs. There is a DVD of Mozart. I saw them selling it in the lobby for Edwin Drood.
Yes.
I know there's going to be a CD for Ichinana Hachikyu. And occasionally things show up on TV. If it's an OG special, they're usually on Sky Stage. Like the performance I was talking about before, Dream a Dream, has aired on Sky Stage. The crazy sci-fi Nihon mono that I was just talking about, DNA Sharaku, aired on, I want to say Wow Wow, something like that. So sometimes
also a lot of the dinner shows and the concerts end up on Sky Stage.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Or get released on DVD. Well, I guess more rarely DVD, but the thing that just popped into my head was the Raging series that's going on, which is a compilation CD of many Takarazuka OGs, I think all former top stars, covering famous Japanese songs, and they started as a compilation CD, and then they did a live concert, and I'm pretty sure you can buy a DVD, definitely at least of the first one, and I'm guessing of the subsequent ones also. But yeah, sadly, a lot of these are one and done, and then they disappear forever. So I personally recommend, if you're in Japan and you have the opportunity to drop a little bit more than a standard ticket on a show.
It's okay. Just quick disclaimer on that. It's not that much. Like a Seki Takarazuka show will go for roughly the equivalent of $80 US or about 8,000 Japanese yen, and a Takarazuka OG production is maybe 1,100 yen.
Yeah.
So it's not unreasonable. It's not like we're asking you to pay for a dinner show or something, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not unreasonable, and I think you can see a lot of really cool stuff. So if you have the opportunity, I definitely recommend it. And it's cool to see the same non-OG popping up in different productions too. Like, I don't know, you might find someone you like.
Yes.
So with those closing thoughts, as always, if you have any questions whatsoever, leave them on the blog. We get to all the Q&As eventually. We even still have the old unaddressed ones, and we promise we will get to them eventually. We love hearing your questions, and we hope you enjoyed this episode.
Many thanks to Michael B. and the Arcanum String Quartet for their wonderful arrangement of Sumire no Hana Sakugoro. And thank you, listeners, for enjoying our podcast.